Hello YouTube, this is the Lonely Wolf here again, and welcome back to my channel. So it's been a long time since we've actually spoken to each other or I've released any sort of videos. So today I'm really excited to actually make my debut again. This time I have an interviewer. So this is somebody that I met on the internet through a book club. Okay, so this is the Lucky or the Unlucky Wanderer, or we'll just call him Lucky for now. So he is an honours student. So his interest is in psychology, and in particular, he's doing a study of oops, I've got a, okay, there was another version of me just playing in the background because I forgot to mute the actual interview itself. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. So I'll try that again. Okay. So this is Lucky. So he is doing some research. So he's a major in psychology. And so he's actually studying the psychology of incels. So we all pretty much know what incels are. So I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't really looked at much of the sort of material that gets published on the internet, but there's probably some, issues that we can be concerned about, but also, there's some content that's a bit, I don't know what to call that. Okay.
Not safe for work. Not safe for work.
Not safe for NSFW. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the level of qualification. So a lot of viewers might be in America. So we're both going to be talking about honors. Okay. So basically the structure of that is, so you'll do your undergraduate study. So that could be a 3 or 4 year degree. And then after that, once you've completed that, so if you've gotten, a fair enough GPA, then you have the option of going on to honors. So it's kind of it's kind of a teeny tiny PhD, like a fraction of a PhD where, you do a dissertation. So you find an area of research you do, and then a lot of coursework. And perhaps in my case, when I did mine in mathematics, a long time ago, and I just fell into it, okay, because I was offered a scholarship and I thought, okay, I'll take it. And it's a very challenging year, so a lot of people think it's designed to break you. So I agree with that. I think it's, I wish it was a little bit easier, but they make it too damn hard. And so that's what I did in mathematics, and this is what Lucky is doing with psychology. Okay, so then I guess if you get your honors and you go after that, then that's level. People go into masters, or they might go into PhD, where we can, have doctors next to our name. But I don't have the proclivity. Like, I'd love to be a doctor, but it's like I don't have the proclivity, because after doing the honors year, that was like 2002, I thought, okay, no more. I've reached my limit. Okay, so let's talk to Lucky a little bit. So I just wanted to find out a little bit more about your sort of honors research. So if you could tell me a little bit about so what your thesis would be about, so what interested you in this topic, and then, basically what's the underlying issues we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go with your second question first, which is, what interested me in it. Mm-hmm. So a few things. And one of them is our conception of masculinity was the first one. I'm a youngish guy. I spent a lot of time online, playing video games, doing all that good stuff. And I was somewhat active on video games around the whole Gamergate saga, which, but I never got embroiled in it. I didn't care for it. But, you see a lot of young men, and they're caught up in this real vitriolic and hateful sort of discourse. And, that's disconcerting to me, especially because, just looking at me, I'm very much the target demographic for what could have been a Gamergater. I just had no real time or inclination. I wasn't really that big online in those sorts of areas. But, yeah, around that time I was also a teacher. And I dealt with a lot of kids who had, major anxiety, depression. They disengaged from school. And then seeing a lot of this discourse happen online, later on, I got worried because I noticed, okay, yeah, there's a lot of people, and they're falling for these things that are just angry and hateful. And I got interested more in, I think, the alt-right than anything else. Just, what leads people down that path of thinking that, Nazism and white nationalism is somewhere where you want to be, which It's absurd to me because, you know, I grew up on Indiana Jones. The Nazis are the bad guys. But yeah, so that was sort of my interest. Sorry, it sounds like you wanted to ask or say something.
That's great. Yeah, because I remember we were sort of talking a little bit about, because it's interesting because I didn't even know that you're a teacher, because I only found out about 2 minutes before we started going on air, and then I've been a teacher of maths as well. Admittedly, I didn't, and this is what I said to you backstage. Like, I didn't really see that coming. I think, okay, when it came to the boys that I taught, or at least I wouldn't think that any of them would go into that Gamergate would really be a thing for them. I think at most they would have had they would have loved the memes. I think they would have gotten into the really dank memes, and I can't blame them. I do as well, just like anybody else. And one of the problems with the backlash, it seems like there's a lot of noise around the discourse. Like, I remember, if you say the name sort of Anita Sarkeesian, it seems kind of weird that that sort of somebody has an opinion. And I tried watching her videos. It didn't really resonate for me or whatever. But at the same time, I thought the reaction, there's a lot of noise there, and at the same time, the noise that was kind of getting buried, I guess, was apparently there is criticisms that can be made for someone like Sarkeesian or anyone of that ilk who criticizes games that way. Like, even from within the actual feminists, like, because I say this is sort of a non-feminist, non-MRA, so I don't really have any descriptive labels for myself, because I can find problems in either discipline. But from what I heard, there was actually a feminist critique of that, and it was to do with especially the sex positive wings of feminism. They sort of took issue. They felt that she was going too much down the path of the second wave, or I guess the Andrea Dworkin version of feminism. And it's like, okay, it would have been great to have those to see those discussions there, but I don't think there was really time for that, because everything else surrounding that, there was just all this noise that was everywhere.
The thing is, a lot of these young men, they see feminism as a monolith, so they don't think, oh, maybe there are actually discussions within feminism that are about, well, what feminism is, and there are obviously different types of feminism. You've got your sort of white or pop feminism. You've got black feminism. You have trans-exclusionary feminism. You've got post-colonialist feminism. You've got Marxist feminism. There are lots of critiques, but the sort of the talking heads of a lot of these movements, they weren't interested in that sort of nuance. They're interested in presenting feminism as something that's going to destroy their games. As somebody who, like, I've never had any problem with critique of any form, I would welcome art criticism applied to video games, because it shows that, well, video games have, reached this new form. This, I don't want to say it like they've ascended or anything like that, but,
no.
Rather than seeing video games as, simply something you do in your off time, they can be experiences. They can be art.
Yeah, it is a medium of art. I think my view of that is that, if that's not, because I admit I don't really care much for that style of criticism that goes towards, it might be talking about, political type things. It's I'm more of a decadent when it comes to analysis of art. I tend to separate art from morality. Probably the Oscar Wilde type school, though. But that's just my view of art, and I just think to myself, well, my choice is I don't have to listen to the critique. I can just watch the films that I watch, and just enjoy them how I want to enjoy them. And if people want to have conversations about them, then we all have our free speech, so we should have those conversations if we want to have those conversations.
Oh, no, and that's exactly right. But there are a lot of talking heads from the manosphere. So pre-Gamergate, I think there was more just the manosphere more broadly, which was a collection of blogs. It was a collection of YouTubers, just a collection of all sorts, and it was very much about, I don't want to say men's rights, but looking at a lot of the research, it was very much constructed as anti-feminist. If you could boil down their identity, it was this idea that masculinity is under attack, and feminism as a cause. And like with a lot of the research that I'm doing, a lot of the groups that have their roots within the manosphere, they all share that same basic underlying notion that, that masculinity is in decline and that feminism is the cause.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's kind of odd to me, especially when it comes to the idea of incel. So sex is obviously a major topic of that, and as someone who is openly asexual, sometimes if I ever enter a conversation about, like, let's say that we're talking about people who might be frustrated because they're having trouble, you know, finding a sexual partner or whatever, or feeling rejected, and to me, it almost feels like I'm a white person walking into a room full of black people and they're discussing civil rights or whatever, because I feel so far removed from, because like, I guess one of the advantages that I have is that I don't really have to think about that sort of thing. Like, it's something I don't have to worry about. Like, I've never ever had to go through the world, wondering like how women perceive me, or men, if I was gay, or if I put on whatever I wear and present myself however I want, and like, never in the back of my mind do I ever think, okay, so how do women perceive me, and am I attractive to them or whatever? So it's almost like one of those situations where, when someone says, to check your privilege before you walk through the door, like, contextually, that's sometimes how it feels like. So that's why I'm sometimes a bit gun shy of entering into a conversation like that, but I'll make an exception for tonight. So you specifically, so with your honors, so are you specifically looking at the incel side of the manosphere?
Yeah, so I'm fairly specifically looking at one forum, which is incels.co, which is
Okay.
it's the successor to incels.me, which was the successor to r/incels on Reddit, which got closed
Oh,
because
okay.
hate speech.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of, so with the research, etc. So could you just tell us a bit about, so you're majoring in psychology. So I understand that, if we were talking about incels, that I could understand the sociology of that, looking at social interactions, and even people who may have done maybe gender studies with that. So could you sort of talk to me a little bit about how psychology, so how that discipline in particular sheds a bit of light upon this subculture?
So yeah, it is somewhat related to sociology. So what I'm doing is discourse analysis within a discursive psychological framework. Now, that's a very broad area, but it's essentially looking at, well, how do these groups construct themselves? So how do they construct the in-group? How do they construct the out-group? How do they construct their worldview? And how do they talk about these things? Now, you can do that very bare basically, as in just purely interpretive, what are called interpretive repertoires. So how they speak and different productions or common features of their speak. In my study, I'm aiming to look more at affective discourse, which is emotional discourse. So what sort of emotions that you can see within their language and what that's used to achieve.
Oh, okay.
So the question of how is it different to sociology or even gender studies, it's the theories that we use, essentially. It's both not different and different. Yeah.
It sounds sort of like the thesis that you're making. It would kind of require an eclectic sort of approach. So it might be that you are drawing from, because psychology isn't just psychology, because there's sort of the because I guess the Durkheim school, like, which I only just know that in passing, where we talk about the social aspects of psychology. And I remember reading about Erikson, that was also very much reliant upon social stuff like that, as opposed to the more cognitive theories of development, etc. So it's like, it sounds like it needs to marry some of those things, like language. So you're studying language, you're studying psychology and sociology. So does that so when you sort of presented this to the I guess, how was it received by your supervisors in the academia?
Well, so actually, part of the reason I'm doing this study is last year when I was still an undergraduate, I one of my lecturers is or was a lady by the name of Professor Martha Agostinos. And something about her lecture got me just thinking about the alt-right. So, I went to talk to her after the lecture, and she was actually the one who said, oh, I'm actually working with somebody in England doing discourse analysis on incels. Have you heard of them? And like, have I heard of them? So she said to me, if you get into honours next year, look me up because I'll happily, supervise you for the project. So I was like, score, I already know exactly what I'm doing next year. So that's actually how I got into it. It's a lot of the social research is it marries up with some of the quantitative data or like real world events. So there's a lot of psychological data which is more quantitative, which looks at the effects of being online on your mental health. So they might do more psychometric data and marry that up with how much time are they spending online. This is more fine grain analysis and looking at when you do quantitative data on people, there's always going to be like a variance of effect. So this is a little bit more fine grained, and if we're looking at sort of the really depressed people, and this is an example, obviously not necessarily related to my research, but if we look at the really depressed people or the really extreme people, what's happening there? What's happening within their world, their discourse, the communities that they inhabit, essentially, online.
Yeah. So so for those of you who don't know, this is how Lucky and I met up. It was because we're doing like a book study. It's called The Social Construction of Knowledge. So I'm not sure how to. I guess the broad stroke is it's kind of marrying philosophy with I guess it's the epistemology, etc., and trying to marry that with I guess the sociology. So there is some. I remember that was the most recent chapter that we were discussing was the language itself. So that's kind of interesting that you get to bring those type of things up. So you mentioned, so it seems like with your research methodology, there's some sort of, you've got some quantitative type studies that you get to do.
Oh, no, I'm not doing any quantitative studies, but you can draw on quantitative studies.
Okay.
So you do end up marrying up with, what has the quantitative literature found? When, I ask this question. And, can that inform my analysis? So, if you maybe look at, I'm trying to think of an example that might work in regards to this. Oh, actually, no, there was a study I read today, and it was very much about, spending time online. And, it was toxic masculinity, depression, and internet behavior or internet use. And asked, if you have these toxically masculine traits and you use the internet, does that make you more likely to be depressed? And the answer is, well, it depends. And that's why the fine grain analysis is then needed, because, I'll see if I can find the study. But essentially it's, we've got this quantitative data, but the quantitative data only really gives us a broad picture. If we can go deeper, we do it with discourse analysis.
Okay, so does that fit into, like, I don't know whether it's safe for me to be using categories or whatever. So is there sort of like a qualitative element? Because I always love that, so because
it's qualitative.
Mathematicians,
Discourse analysis is part of the qualitative analysis side. Sort of it. And even within qualitative analysis, there are more quantitative versions of it. So you might have a corpus analysis where you have a program that, I'm just going to dump all these files into it, and it will count all the different words, and it will tell you, so we can see I has been used, like the word I, as in me, has been used 10,000 times, and the word the has been used 15,000 times. So there are some of those more quantitative versions of qualitative analysis.
Okay, so this is the bit where it gets it's going to get a little bit kind of nasty, I guess.
Yep.
So you've obviously read some of the information on the incel forums. etc. So can you just describe to me just some of the, I guess, examples, some sort of dark things that really stuck out and you think, okay, this is concerning me?
Yeah. Also, during my sort of pre-analysis stage, so I chose a specific month to pick um, forum posts that I was going to analyze. So I'm studying only the forum posts that were done in April, mainly because of time constraints. There's no way I'm doing like a whole year's worth. I have a lot more things to do, and they post a lot. Um, but so in my pre-analysis, there was a forum post, and it was let me get it. Background. Sorry, just having a look, and it was I think it was in that one there, and it was basically yeah. Um, Women enjoy being coercively penetrated by chads. That was the title. I had to fix up that word there. So obviously, coercively penetrated. That's not the word they used.
No, they're looking for another way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's this. Look at this. They'll pick out posts on Reddit or on TikTok or whatever they can find, and they'll use it to justify their worldview. And so they'll have ones like that where it's women don't mind being coercively penetrated so long as it's done by attractive men.
Ugh.
And that's like, how do you get there? How do you get to that level of just I don't even know, just that level of delusion?
Yeah, I think the one thing that stuck out for me, I guess if we're talking about discourse analysis, was there's kind of a numerical scale. Like I hear a lot of people referring themselves as so these chads are the eights and even
8s, 9s, and 10s.
Yeah, and even the like even some women who are only 4s, like they can still they still expect that they can get with a chad who's like a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, and the first thing going into my brain is like, I know nothing about dating because obviously because of the way I live or whatever, my proclivity. But at the same time, I'm thinking maybe it's not the most romantic thing in the world. It's not going to endear yourself to the opposite sex to be putting a numerical ranking on somebody.
Yeah, well, that's how their entire worldview works, though, so when you're looking at black-pilled incels, so do you know much about like MRA discourse between blue and red pill?
Okay, I probably describe myself as a purple pill. It's like, okay. I've been,
but
okay, I've done a bit of red pill.
Yeah, you know what the blue pill is, you know what the red pill is.
The red pill is. So what is the black pill? Is that a level?
Okay, so so the red pill, just for the viewers who don't know, the red pill is this idea that we live in a gynocracy, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So a society ruled by vaginas, because these guys are really, really sexist. But if you know like these tips and tricks, or you can sort of use that to your advantage, and you can ascend. So that's where a lot of like pickup artists will draw from. They'll say, well, yeah, we're ruled by women, but if you want to get laid, you've got to dress nice. You got to have amazing hair. You got to follow these things. These rules. You got to attack women's like self-esteem through negging and other things, and then you'll get laid, right?
What's negging?
Negging is a backhanded compliment. So, you might be talking with a girl, like within a group setting, and you might throw out something which comes off as, a compliment, but it's really backhanded. So it sort of attacks their self-esteem. So it might be, I'm trying to think of examples. I don't neg people, so like I'm not really good at thinking up or remembering what they are on the spot. But it might be something like, oh, there's a girl who's laughing, and you might point out, is she always this loud when she laughs, or something like that. So you draw attention to something that they might find make them self-conscious, essentially, right?
Yeah.
With the black pill, however, well, just to move it along, otherwise we'll
Black
get
pill.
sidetracked. With the black pill, the idea is that the only thing that matters is looks. That's it. The only thing that matters in society is looks, and looks are genetically determined. You can't change it because it's based on your genetics. So whatever genes you have, and however you appear, that's it. That's you. And all of your life will be determined by that. So if you are, a 9 out of 10 as a male, great. You have lots of sex. There'll be a lot of opportunities open to you in your working life because people just naturally, feel more comfortable around attractive people. Whereas if you're born ugly, you're never going to get laid. Right? So if you're 3 out of 10 or lower, you'll never get laid. And people will look at you with suspicion because you're ugly, essentially.
Okay, that's
Yep.
that almost makes me feel depressed, and
Yeah.
that's just and that's just getting a culture overview. But, I sort of imagine what it would do to the psyche if this was what you surrounded yourself with, and
Yeah.
so like it's kind of like related to psychology. It's because I feel like it's a problem with a lot of people, and just a lot of type of discourses on left and from right. I think we've abandoned a lot of the cognitive behavioral therapy because I remember learning about those things, and it seems like some of the things they do, it goes against what people say about cognitive therapy or whatever, because it seems that that when you sort of go into these forums or whatever, because you start off with the problem is that I'm lonely, and then you think, okay, it's because of Chads or whatever, and then to go into
It's
that.
not because of Chads. It's not because of Chads.
No.
It's because of women.
Right? Oh, okay.
So with the black pill, because they all have all of these discourses have their roots within the manosphere. Anything that's wrong with the world can be traced directly back to the feminism of the 1960s and 1980s. Right? So their belief is that the real reason for feminism was not for women's rights, but it was so women could have increased access to Chads. That's it. That's what they believe, that feminism was about women having more access to sleeping with Chads, with good-looking men.
Okay, that sounds. I don't remember Germaine Greer ever writing about Chads, but okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the cognitive cycle or whatever, because it just seems like it's this never-ending cycle. Because when you you're lonely, yep, and and I've got sympathy for there's people who are sort of naturally awkward, and they do have to do a lot of work on themselves. But then it's sort of like when you go into these forums or whatever, and you're surrounded by this discourse, then you kind of turn into someone who's very ugly. Like on the inside, you become very, very ugly, and then that makes you even more attractive to the opposite sex. And it's like, okay, I've become more unattractive, but that's because of this. That's because of this external thing out there. So then that sort of validates like that internal cycle. And it's like, I almost wish there could be a short circuit to say, okay, look, you just need to get out of log off for a little bit, go for a walk, put on a nice outfit, clean your room. Even like
okay,
follow
Jordan
a little
Peterson.
follow a little bit of Jordan Peterson. Like, because that the book in itself is like that's like I read it myself, and I'm a fan of some of those things, like the that philosophy of sort of watching your posture of everything like that. Because I feel that way. I think even professionally, sometimes if I dress up, really nicely, if I have a sort of new outfit or something like that, it makes me feel like I can have a more successful day and I can be productive and confident.
Let me show you something about how much I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can see it, but hanging on my wall is about 90 bow ties.
Oh, okay. And you got some good ties as well. Are some of them Hogwarts ties?
No. They're all
No?
just.
I thought I saw a Hufflepuff tie.
No. I mean, there's a lot of colors there. But no. I agree with you 100% because I bought all those bow ties to force me to wear like a shirt so that I can then do up the bow tie. Because, it's nice dressing nice. It really is. So yeah, there is something to that. But yeah, sorry, but I've interrupted you.
Yeah,
I
because
just like showing. I
I
like
don't know.
showing
What
off
if
my
I
bow
got
ties.
yeah, what if I got because this shirt that I've got to stand up a little bit. Yeah, it's got like this side thing on there, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I because I ordered it in the mail. It came in the mail, and same with jewelry as well. Like I had like a few my new rings, etc. And when I put them on, I sort of thought, okay, I feel successful, and I feel like I can do this today. And even makeup, like I put on like a certain amount of foundation, like very, very lightly though. Like I don't want people to think that I'm wearing makeup or whatever, but I got like a light foundation and my face feels fresh. And it's like, okay, I've gotten rid of a few lines, like I've hidden a few lines. So, it's like, it's not all about looks or whatever, but it's more for your own, it's more for your own benefit that you kind of pick yourself up and carry yourself with this dignity. So like, it doesn't have to be because you want to impress these people over here. It's because you live so that you can impress yourself. And when, I believe that if you sort of carried yourself like that and you're living to impress yourself and you're working on it, like that would probably be infinitely more attractive to, I guess, the rest of the world.
Yeah. Oh no, it would. But again, with the way that they've constructed the world and the way that they've constructed women, that wouldn't matter, right? Because the feminism of the 60s and 80s, that was all about increasing women's access to Chad, and also um, because they now have bodily autonomy, that is, you can't force them into sex. Um, now they get they hold the sexual power, the sexual power within that dynamic, and so women who are a 4 and above, they'll only want to sleep with chads, 8s, 9s, and 10s.
Okay. Yeah, I
That's the
mean,
way that they've constructed it. So so that means that the 7 out of 10 men and below only have access to the 1s, 2s, and 3s out of women.
okay.
And I actually think it might
And
even be worse than that. But yeah, so in other words, it's a much more limited sexual marketplace for anyone who's not an 8 out of 10 or
and
higher.
I guess to me, sometimes I've looked. I think Rush V is probably the first name that comes when it comes to pickup artists or whatever. And I think it's important to be, I guess, for the nuance there, because I recognize that there's, I guess they call it the manosphere. So there's MGTOW's MRA, pickup artists, this and that. So the one thing that's a bit weird that I find, especially on the Twitter discourse, when they kind of confuse one group for another, it's I sort of, I think there's a lot of nuance to be had about the differences between those groups and how much they actually don't like each other very much. That's one of the added wrinkles, is that they really, because I understand that the MGTOWs, I think the pickup artists really hate the MRAs, like for what they're
They all
doing.
hate each other. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's one of the things.
they all draw water from the same source when it comes to their construction of the world and women. So they are all, in many respects, a lot of their discourse is defined by anti-feminism more than it
Yeah,
is a positive in-group
yeah,
identity. But
yeah. Because I
but
like to
they
see,
do hate each other.
yeah, when it comes to, I guess when it comes to men's rights activism, because I don't really use that word anymore, probably because, like most of my time, I just think, what am I talking about the most? And I guess mostly my conversations are about LGBT stuff. So I kind of like stepped away from, I guess the feminism, MRA, any of the gender stuff. I haven't really touched that for a long time, like on my own channel. It's, I guess what I try to do is, like I try to sort of, there are some sort of wrinkles that I see that when you see the actual work that's being done. So if I see somebody who's, a men's rights, they're self-described as a men's rights activist, and if I can look at whatever their work is, so if they're doing something really sort of positive, like there's one that I know, he visited schools or whatever, and he was connecting with the gay community, etc. So to look specifically at gay men, and there's actually one group that I was in. It was an MRA type group, but it's mostly most of us are somewhat trans or non-binary, etc. So that was an extra sort of wrinkle. So sometimes there's some, when it comes to that, and even MGTOW, there's exceptions to that rules. Like I find that I've actually got one of them who's a good friend of mine, and even though he's a MGTOW, he's actually lived by the word. He says he's gone his own way. Like he doesn't look back and complain about whatever it was to let him. That he just says, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to do unboxing videos and you know
Yeah.
and he's just living by his word. So that's the thing. Like I do have respect for people who follow those mantles. They like men's rights activists who are doing good work for men, and MGTOWs, there are men who are going their own way and they live by that actual description. Like I've got the respect for those. Like even though there's even though for the good ones, there's also the the weaker arguments or people who sort of don't seem to be doing anything to advance the cause.
Yeah. Oh yeah. With the MGTOWs, it's funny. I was actually reading an article today about MGTOWs as part of my research, and one of the things they said was because it's men going their own way, there are so many different ideas of, well, what does it mean to go your own way? And because anyone, for some, it might be like your friend there who's literally just said, well, I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm just going to find my best self. But a lot of them, because they sort of stay within the discourse, the discourse is very much centered around, feminism being a problem. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them think, oh, I'm still going to go my own way. But they can't help but talk about women. And it's negatively most of the time. But again, that might be more of a thing of the ones that sort of stay within those sort of, group mentalities online.
Yeah, because my good friend, he's a MGTOW, because I've interviewed him so many times on my channel, or we've just streamed a lot together, and we speak on Discord because we can talk like forever or whatever. And Idiola, because at the time I was mainly self-described as an MRA, and then I sort of dropped any sort of labels because I realized I don't really deserve any label. Like I don't deserve to call myself a feminist or an Emma because I haven't specifically done anything that's like for the good cause of women or whatever, or when I've made arguments for like let's say rape culture, or I've made arguments, pro-choice arguments or whatever, and then with men stuff, but I don't really have any credentials that sort of qualified me to call myself any of those things. So I just kind of didn't really have that. But it was
So you sort of going your own way?
Well, it's kind of similar to some way. I think that like maybe I have the elixir of life that they could have. Like if they were asexual, then like they probably don't like me. They could be jealous of what I have because I think I have because if they want to talk about being free from women or whatever, like I'm actually a person who I love women though. That's the thing. Like as colleagues, as family, as friends or whatever, and women have loved me and I've loved them right back. But at the back of my mind, I've got this notion I am actually free from any sort of I guess whatever they call it, the draw of femininity, whatever. I'm sort of free of that because of my I guess my innate sexuality that and so I guess some people, they might even think, okay, they might even be jealous of that, I guess, in some cases, because I've achieved like the ultimate like Chad level.
Well, no, you're exactly right, because I think part of the reason why a lot of these online discourses focus so much on still talking about women, even if they're men going their own way, is because they are still heterosexual men,
Yeah.
And so it is kind of hard to say, well, I'm going to go my own way, but I'm still going to look at that woman from afar, and why won't she sleep with me? And it's like, dude. Like,
yeah, I mean, my friend, the MGTOW guy, he focuses mostly on sort of looking after himself because he's very big on fashion. He sort of has a cowboy hat and the bolo tie or whatever, and he does the unboxing saying, "Oh, this is my new cufflink" or whatever. So he seems to take pleasure in those small things in life. But he talks about sometimes he describes it as the siren call that he wants to try to resist. So think that that's an interesting way of thinking about it. So I guess
the other thing that I was going to say in regards to that though is that with MGTOWs, because they are still quite heterosexual, a lot of them still have to find a way to demonstrate their heterosexuality, because it is a somewhat masculine oriented decision. And because, again, a lot of their discourse has its roots within the manosphere, how do I show my heterosexuality when I'm trying to go my own way? And so sometimes that's why you end up seeing some either reproduce homophobia or transphobia, because that is an acceptable form of masculinity, within the toxically masculine behaviors. But,
Yeah, because I think Roosh V, like that sort of comes to mind when I think of pickup artists, because even in the Twitter, I don't think I could actually sit through a book like that. I don't think I could survive that. I mean, maybe you could read if it comes down to research like purposes. I guess you could force yourself to read a book. But I don't think I could, because I've seen the tweets themselves and the ridiculousness of his claims, and I sometimes have to question, like, is he really successful at like, does he really sleep with a lot of women? Because I sort of look at him and he looks unwashed. Like, I just think, it looks like he hasn't washed his, I don't want to be crude, but he hasn't washed his balls in like 3 months. That's what he looks like to me. And the way that he talks, like he was talking about, because men are often attracted to women, like their bottoms, okay, like they like pat them on the bum or whatever, so they're attracted to that. But then Rushby warned that is a gateway to homosexuality.
Yep. Yeah, and you see a lot of that.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, devil's advocate to sort of have that. So incel's one of those words, I keep seeing it over and over again. Sometimes, do you believe that it might be overused in some cases?
Incel?
Yeah, the term incel.
Well, this is a self-described descriptor. So, okay. I mean, possibly if somebody's accusing you of being an incel, and I see that sometimes thrown around like as an insult, but for the people that I'm studying, no, because that's their own self-description. Like that's the I want to say group membership, but I'm talking about that within a social identity format. That's the identity they ascribe to.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I wanted to bring up is the kind of weaker, I guess you can call them because I don't really say feminism, I say feminisms. I guess there's a weak branch of it. And I think that's the problem. I guess the current fourth wave feminism, I guess the start of it was, I think the optics had turned like kind of bad, like at the beginning of that. But I don't know what to say about it, because when I see, the ones that are like men are trash, and then I hear one about, coronavirus saying, why can't it kill men faster or whatever. So some people, they use that as an example, saying, okay, we're correct. This sort of justifies their ideology. But like, I think it's actually okay to call out that sort of thing and say that, if they say men are trash, because like in the let's say it's an intersectional framework or whatever, like you can easily kind of challenge those type of reductive views, like not straight up, like, but you can sort of have a conversation about it behind the scenes. And what I find, insidious about that is that, okay, what kind of men are we talking about? Because, there's an implied thing like that, because we could be talking about trans men, and then you include black men in there as well. And so that's usually what I say about that when people have those type of things. And generally, like, to sum it up, like, my approach is just not to engage in it. I mean, that's not really my problem. Like, it's not my job to prove to anybody that I'm not like trash and I should live. It's not my job to prove anything. Like, if someone's made up their mind based on, what they see in front of me, that's them, and I'm only responsible for living my life.
Yeah. My argument to that question is, if you see somebody saying, all men are trash, and you have to say, well, not me, I'm going to say you're a trash person. Only because, and I mean this very generally, but if you're not a trash person, then, you shouldn't feel offended by that. Not in the slightest, because why would you need to defend yourself from an accusation that isn't leveled against you?
Yeah, I don't, when it comes to Twitter, like, I don't actually engage that meme, sorry, not the meme. Okay, it can be a meme sometimes. I don't engage that kind of Twitter argument when I see something like that, because
Twitter is not worth engaging with.
No, it's not. It's an idea that's not really worth engaging in. Like, No,
I just mean in general, Twitter is terrible.
In general, because I don't really, because for all I know, the person who wrote that, they might have gone through, it might be driven by trauma or something like that. Someone's had a bad day or something like that. Or like when you sort of like go in there and type that, it's like, I can understand why, like, you're not going to respond to that person. Like I tend to, if I challenge that idea or the nature of that discourse, it's mostly in a conversation that's on its own, kind of like what we're having now. It's just like putting that idea out there that it's there. And generally my advice to people like that is, you don't have to engage in that. And, and that's what I say. And I think a lot of people are making themselves unhappy when they continue these cycles of arguments, because there's a particular pocket of, it resembles 2016, really. It's this pocket of Twitter where it's this, there's an MRA sort of group, but then there's also like a group, these are kind of, they come across as a weaker branch of feminism. They don't seem to have a very robust sort of position, like as opposed to the more academically inclined sort of feminism, or the one that's got a bit more nuance. And it's, and I feel like they've repeated the same arguments to each other, over again, and nobody's listening. And the just the insults, like the first one is when they say that, okay, let's say that it's a man who agrees with a woman, you're just doing it to get laid. And then the second one is like the woman who sides with the men, it's like, oh, you're just trying to look for attention. Like I don't really like the idea of people being reduced down to their sexuality, and that's their motive for whatever they believe in. I mean, there's a complicated reasons why people, like, I can agree with them, I can disagree with them, but I really don't like that sort of discourse where it's people are just being reduced down to these sexual bodies.
No, I agree 100%. But I think Twitter is almost designed to do that, because there's only so much you can fit within 280 characters, and I think you end up with the most reductive of possible comments, and the most polarized of positions. I don't think there's no room for nuance within the character count.
No. And I guess yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think social media in general is complicit, not just Twitter, but Facebook and other sort of services. I think they're all sort of complicit in this hyperpolarization and reducto ad absurdum of constructing people.
Yeah, because what I see, because I sort of agree with that. There's a certain implicit thing, and I don't know how far to the left you go. Like if you support any anti-capitalist sentiment, that'd be great. But that's my criticism of how capitalism has kind of it's an unholy union of like hyper-capitalism with like social justice issues. And I feel like a lot of the most hyperbolic of articles, let's say it comes from the weaker feminist arguments, seem to have it's not that I don't think that those people believe in those things. I think that they're being driven because it's a clickbait. Okay, so there's got a title, it's going to be deliberately provocative, and it's kind of sad that because of the incentivization of clickbait and hyperbole, that sort of that seems to be the argument that comes forward. Whereas the reality is like we have to. It's sad that we have to look deeper to find the better arguments for a certain position, and that's what led me to be sort of like, I'm not going to be inherently anti-feminist or or either way. It's just because just based on experience, I just happen to know people in the real world who describe themselves that way. I happen to know them. I happen to have friends with them, and they've got a bit more of they seem to have a lot more nuance, and you can have a discussion about things in a nuanced way. And there are channels that have like a much more robust argument that's being put forward. But unfortunately, that's kind of the work you have to put in to actually find that, as opposed to it's so easy to see the clickbait.
Yeah. Oh, well, it is. And if you want the good feminist arguments, they're behind a paywall in academic papers. And they are buried in long form essays or long form like videos, like video content. And the way the world is at the moment is very much a too long didn't read or too long didn't listen to. As you said, we'll share things with a clickbaity headline. How many of you read the article? Like, my favorite is there's the Onion article where it goes something like 90% of people don't only read the headline, and a lot of people will share that. But if you click into it, it's just all in Latin, and it's meaningless gibberish. Like if you read the article.
That's funny, isn't it? Well, yeah, because I think I guess like my personal take on that, probably the strongest argument for feminism and probably for trans activism or whatever. I think interesting, like a male feminist. So that's Micaiah B. So a friend of, I think she's been friends with Christy and Christiosity, etc. But I don't think she still has his. I don't think he still has his content up. But it's a lot of articles. I think that was probably the strongest case because it's backed by like a lot of sources, and he does the he's very convincing as well because with the speech or with the video essays, it's the ethos, pathos, and logos. It's those three things that have like come together. And I sort of disagree when people say, "Oh, you should only concentrate on you can only focus on the content of the speech, the delivery." But sometimes those things go in tandem because emotion does propel your argument forward in some cases if it's done very well. Like especially if it's sometimes anger, it does.
Anger, like so. One of the a lot of the articles that I searched for when looking at emotion is the role of anger, because if you look at a lot of first off, the guiding principle is that we hate feminism. That is very much the guiding principle of a lot of these discourses that I'm looking at. So it's very much based on anger. And it's very motivating. Anger can be very motivating, especially when you're attacking an in-group. Like if I'm part of this in-group and, I'm now riled up at the out-group, well, that's a motivating force. Like you can encourage people to act on anger. You can't encourage people to act on depression because depression is all about lying in your bed for 24 hours a day. Not that I've definitely done that for 7 days straight. But and I think we sort of underestimate the power of pathos. Like we like to pretend we're logos, but we're not.
Yeah. But I think a good speech has like all three of those things. Like they kind of marry, they complement, they propel each other forward, and sometimes they can make a very good argument. Because that's why I saw, like my example of Micaiah B. So he's a trans dude, and he's made a lot of content like that, and it's like all three of those things are there. Like there's all the academic research in there, but when the anger happens, it's actually in that way, it's kind of effective and productive in that way. Like especially when he was talking about bullying or something like that, the situations of that, and you could hear that, and it was basically said, I'm not gonna moderate. Like I'm not gonna allow comments that are bullying or whatever. I don't care about your feelings, whatever anymore. I don't give a shit anymore. Like I'm moderating my comments, and if you don't like it, then fuck off. Hello, Aircraft Sparky. So in the chat, so I've got Memes of Destruction. He's been here for a while, so he's having fun. And here's Aircraft Sparky. So by the power of Grayskull, he has the power. Oh, Sparky. So I guess one of the things I'm curious about, because we both come from background in education. So is there a particular age, or can you guess like a particular age in which people may start to engage in an ideology like that?
I wouldn't try to guess. It's a variable thing. It's when it starts appearing in your YouTube autoplay feature. It's when you start. It might not even be that. It might be the Twitch streamer that you listen to, or watch. It might be any number of things. Like there was a study about a year or so ago where they looked at like the alt-right pipeline. And I think it was American Johnson or somebody else already had a video on it, but they actually did a study of it. And, there are many entry points. Some of them are as easy as Joe Rogan. And, Joe Rogan's a fairly big name in the podcasting scene. And so, you might listen to a Joe Rogan podcast and be like, oh, wow, that was a really good interview with that person. Who was it? Oh, Gavin McInnes. I'm going to look them up. And, it's very quick down the rabbit hole there. But, it could be Twitch streamers. It could be somebody like PewDiePie. Who they're aimed at or at what age, it's really hard to say. because there are so many entry points and there are so many exit points. Like, you might end up as an incel, you might end up as a MGTOW, you might end up as
Yeah.
an anti-social justice warrior.
So, is
If you're
there
really unlucky, you'll be watching Sargon of Akkad.
yeah, I, and that's my problem that I have. Okay, so Aircraft Swaggy says, I get death threats in my comment section. I respond with God bless. Bullying is not only accepted against me, it's encouraged. Well, Sparky, you don't need to turn the other cheek all the time. Like, I know that it says it in the Bible, turn the other, but sometimes you can, I don't think God anticipated Twitter or YouTube when those commandments were made. Like, I wish we could come, like Christ could come back to earth or something like that and just say, okay, can we make an amendment to these commandments just to take into account the current circumstances and the technologies that I didn't foresee that you people would do.
Yeah. The new first commandment would be, don't be a fucking dick. Sorry, I have the good place censor filter.
Yeah, that's generally what, and it goes across any sort of any lines, no matter what your philosophy was. I don't see what's wrong with just saying, just be nice to other people and don't go out of your way to fuck up somebody's day.
Oh, it's not even don't be nice. Just be nice to people. Just don't be bad to them. It's the bare minimum of acceptable behavior is just don't be bad. You don't have to be good. Just don't be bad. Can you do that for me, please? I'm begging you here.
Yeah. But that was because admittedly okay, so when I taught I'm trying to think about how the girls and boys sort of related to each other. I didn't see that coming. It was probably a different era though, because that was like, I think it was 2015 was the last time I was working with a lot of people like that. What I found from that was I thought at the age of 14 that's where I become really concerned about girls more than anyone else, because it was the nature of it was a passive aggressiveness, and there was a lot of self harm that was very, very visible, and so that was sort of disconcerting to say the least. But then, looking back, I can think, okay, that's kind of the visible scars. But then I thought, okay, out of all the boys that I've taught or whatever, like how many of them might have had there was something underneath that, or scars that weren't being shown.
Well, and that's exactly it. The way, the way a lot of us are expected to behave as men, when we're not meant to show feelings. The only acceptable feeling for a man is anger, in a lot of ways. So you are right. Like, there are a lot of young boys out there who, they have these scars and they're scared to talk about it because, it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable as a young man to talk about your mental health. We're getting better these days, I will say that. But,
Yeah.
It can be difficult as a guy to say, I'm sad, or
Yeah.
like I would like to cry because I'm unhappy, or show that sort of emotion.
Well, I mean, it's probably easy for me to say that because I've worked in like my current office that I work in. It's like I'm very much one of the few male people in the actual office, so it's so I wouldn't really understand what it's like to be in a place that's not like that or whatever. And one of the it's because that's the thing with I guess with current gender, like the way people talk about it. Like sometimes I think of it as a 4x4 kind of matrix. Like I think about how men relate to men and what problems arise from that, and then the way men will relate to women, and then the way women relate to men, and then the way women relate to women. So it's like a 4x4, and the sizes of those the sizes of those cells don't necessarily have to be the same or carry the same weight, but yeah, that's kind of the way that I sort of conceptualize that. It's and I sort of feel like it's
and there are
situational. Yeah, it's situational as well. Yeah, it's sort of situational. I feel at the age of 14, there's something happens for young people. Like young men end up, they become stupid, and then and the young women, that's where that's the probably the worst emotional journey of their high school life. It's like, I don't know whether it's still like that, but that's where it's a concern for women versus women. That's my biggest concern, like in that particular age bracket. But then later on down the path, like when it comes to the professional world out there, then there's like how men treat women or whatever. So if they're in a workplace that's sexist, and that becomes different. So it's like, it feels like a different cycles of people's life. Like those 4 different types of interactions, they seem to carry more weight.
But they also change as you vary in age. Like the way boys bully boys when they are adolescents is very different to the way that they do it when they're in their early 30s. And it's the same with how women interact with and bully each other when they're adolescents, and then when they're older. There's a lot of, I think, similarities, but it's and there's a lot of definitely, I think, similarity in outcome, but in how it's how it's done, there can be a lot more variability.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So speaking of, so we'll talk about a little bit about the honors. I guess, so for those of you who just joined, so both of us are, I graduated the honors in maths. So that's kind of, it's kind of a miniature, teeny tiny PhD. You don't get called a doctor if you finish it. You should be able to, though. Because by the time you survive it, you should be able to have some sort of honorific title, even if it says, pseudo, maybe a pseudo,
Ons.
I deserve to be called, the ons, or I deserve to be called like pseudo PhD, something like pseudo doctor. Like that would be great, because it's such a tough year. But it's basically a 1-year research program where you do a certain amount of coursework, you do like research work, so you compile a thesis, then it has to be presented to some academics. So there's a speech, and then there's the written thing that looks like a goddamn book, and you still don't get to be called a doctor. But then it's kind of the intermediary phase between undergraduate and then postgraduate, like where people train to become the thing that has the doctor next to it. So okay, can you describe your stress levels for us?
Oh, you know what? Because I was a teacher for 8 years, they're not bad. They're not bad.
Okay.
This is nowhere near as bad as teaching. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of stress. Had I not been a teacher, I'd probably up to, somewhere, 13 or 14 out of 10. But yeah, I'm sitting on about a 7. But again, that's
good.
That's got a lot to do with the fact that I'm 30 now. I've had a lot of work experience as a teacher, so I know what stress is like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could imagine that if I hadn't been through this, and I've got friends who are doing the honors program with me, and they're stressing. They're mostly curled up in the fetal position, thinking, "Why did I do this to myself?"
Yeah. There were times where I felt that way. It's I think because from what you've said, it sounds like you've got a mentor who's kind of got your back, someone supportive. I didn't feel I've got
2. I'm very lucky.
You got 2. I felt like I didn't even have anything because I wasn't actually given that much specification about what, because I chose, okay, this is the area of research I'll go with this professor here. But then, he wasn't specifically clear about, okay, what he wanted to do with the research. It was like I was, there's a lot of articles that he referred me to or whatever, and I just assumed, okay, I'll just try to go along with whatever was there, and I felt like he didn't really understand like any of my questions that I'd ask or whatever, so I felt like I was kind of alone, and then I just went with it, and basically he says, I just want you to implement the results, and I thought, okay, implement what? And that just means there was a theoretical, like there's all this mathematics, so it was mathematical finance, and so a lot of it was these articles, so it had a theoretical thing, so it was basically what I tried to do was create the practical applications for that. So it was writing a lot of code, which coding is not my natural skill. It didn't come to me naturally. So that's what really frustrated me more than anything, is when the code didn't work out and I didn't get my output that I wanted. But I worked through that, and then it was writing the programs to get the codes out to simulate some of the processes they were talking about in the mathematical finances. And I think probably the worst part of it, I think at the end when I had to give the presentation that accompanied the dissertation or whatever, and it was every academic that was in the maths department, and like some of them were a very good presence because I'd known them for a long time, and I guess once you go into the smaller departments, you get to know, they know you by name. Like even when you're in your third year, like people start to know who you are, etc. So some of it was okay, but then some of them were people I'd never met, and there might have been part of my paper where that person is an expert on that field. So I'm thinking, okay, if I've shit the bed on this part, like that person is probably going to ask a question. And you know what? I just because there was a lot of people sort of in the room or whatever. So I just had my family and I just said, look, can you just pretend you're students or whatever? So you're just like my colleagues or whatever. So they sat at the back because I needed to see, okay, there's my family over there, mum, dad, brother. It was like the only thing that was keeping me anchored to that ground then, because I'd never been so, like I didn't have an anxiety attack or anything like that, but my stomach was just sinking because I thought, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Did you actually get to choose your supervisor and your project, or you just sort of?
Yeah, so I chose the area of expertise, but it was a very broad kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was a lot to do with I think calculus was sort of fractional calculus, and there was sort of topics in mathematical finance. So the idea of diffusion processes and things like that. Because some of those, some of the financial models, they have a parallel with physics when they talk about Brownian motion. It's like there's an equation for Brownian motion, and then there's and a lot of it means you're trying to simulate, I guess, the movement. So once you write a code, you can kind of simulate, what the movement of this stock would look like, and then you're just incorporating these extra frictions because with financial models, they've got these assumptions that kind of simplify the model so that you can do all those things. So I guess the research areas is, what happens if this assumption here doesn't hold when there's a friction or whatever. So I guess the last thing I really wanted to talk about is that, I think that you've, it seems like you've kind of married a lot of disciplines together, even though, which I think it's a good thing. I'm so glad that you didn't have to sort of pigeonhole yourself into this small thing, because that works for maths and science. But with, let's say it's psychology, sociology, it's like the number of disciplines you can kind of marry together to make a unique kind of thesis with that. So let's say that you've read psychology, you've read philosophy. Have you seen any sort of friction between those areas where you've got an area from one area that may not necessarily agree with this area here, and they kind of, or their philosophy just completely grinds the...
The funny thing with the social sciences and psychology is that, yes, I have, and generally it's within psychology. I don't even need to go to other areas because humans are quite complex. And so, we try to model behavior. If you look at old behavioral studies, you have the Roscola-Wagner model, which is about, how can we mathematically model stimulus and responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, back in the 50s and 60s, they were very big on the whole maths side of things. This was before the cognitive revolution. And there are a lot of things that hold up about it, but then there are competing theories within psychology, competing models, competing ideas. So there is actually a lot of back and forth. And generally the answer is, as to which one is correct, the answer is generally yes. There lots of different theories have a lot of different, validity. Sometimes it's within very niche or, simple areas. Sometimes it's within a much broader domain, but you can apply lots of different theories to things, and you might end up with a similar result, or you might end up with a different result, but it still has some explanatory power.
What the experience that I had was it was two things that were kind of grinding each other, and it felt like there were two units of study that were presented one after the other, and that was when I was doing educational psychology. So it was after I did my maths, and I thought, okay, I'll learn how to teach it. And then, the educational psychology, it's different from the other forms of like clinical psychology, where it has its own things or whatever. But then the next semester I was doing a unit which was the sociocultural stuff, but it didn't really, it was very much applied postmodernism. And it's like, I don't necessarily dismiss postmodernism, and that's been grossly misunderstood, thank you to the YouTube, like a lot of misinformation. But it was it was mostly, it seemed like all the readings we're doing were sort of self-reinforcing, and it seemed to be the same ideology, and that was the Foucault type of analysis, and it felt like I felt like Foucault, or the applied sort of Foucault type analysis, was answering to psychology that we hadn't learned before. It's like, okay, that's not exactly how we did it, because I think that what they wanted to do was to sort of, break down some of the grand narratives, because there are some dangerous narratives that came about from psychology, when it was first practiced, etc. But in the field of educational psychology, like we never had any claim to a grand narrative. We were faced with all these competing theories, and sometimes, we just had to take a little bit from here, and that's how I developed, my own teaching philosophy. Like, I can't say that I subscribe to one theory of development. It's like, I had to actually see it for myself and think, okay, which one of these seems to ring true? And perhaps I sort of thought that there was, Vygotsky, and then there was Piaget, and then so I can see a little bit of truth in just about all of them, but I don't see one of them as being canonical. And that's where I think those two particular units of study, I think they seem to be undermining each other. And I sort of wish that the sort of applied postmodernism we were doing, it seemed to be related to a straw man of psychology that may have applied to mental health institutions, but then to try to place that as a challenge to the actual educational psychology, like all of us in our cohort, we were kind of really confused, thinking, like, and
I'm
that was my
confused
criticism.
listening to you explain it. Like, why would you do Foucauldian analysis?
Yeah, on educational, it makes sense in psychiatric practices when you've got if
Well,
people are in psychiatric.
Well, I mean
Yeah.
more like, why would you do Foucauldian analysis? Because, depending on which sort of Foucauldian analysis you're doing, but if you're doing like a genealogical analysis, that has nothing to do with like educational psychology, because
No, it was
Foucault was very much about explaining power structures. So
yeah.
unless your educational unit was about how does education reinforce existing power structures or something like that, why would you do it?
Yeah, that's I think it was to do with that, because I think the implied implication was that all of this psychological practice, because it's done in the past, because psychology wielded a power, because we could label people as hysterical, or with these mental illnesses, so we could
just quickly, because I need to defend my institution. It's actually psychiatry he was talking about.
Yeah, and so that's odd, isn't it?
You're looking at you're looking at the paper's called The Dangerous Individual, I believe it's called, and it's about the history of. No, you're all good. Just I need to defend my institution's honor.
Yeah, psychology. Yeah, I defend my maths, so I don't hold that against you. It was really odd in that way. I think they were sort of because I know that psychiatry in the time there was, let's say they talked about the condition of hysteria, so that could be used to sort of dismiss women with opinions or whatever, saying, oh, she's hysterical, so she needs this treatment or whatever. But then to talk about educational psychology, so there's an implication that I guess it can be abused or whatever, so that we can try to we're trying to control students when it comes to, I guess there's motivational models or whatever. And so I was trying to think of the other aspect of what it was, and then their sort of view of power. So when it comes to education, like even when it does like playground duty, they talked about it was the panopticon kind of concept, and like the way that teachers position themselves on the oval to do their playground duty, and they look around, they say this is similar to the panopticon. I'm thinking, what?
You're on playground duty. Just walk around, make sure kids aren't hurting themselves.
That is the idea. You do need to see everything that's going around you. Like I'm not sure what these theoreticians were trying to think about. And I don't think applied postmodernism is wrong in of itself. It's got its it's got its roots there, but at the same time, I think that in some hands it's the very snobby sort of elite. Like I've seen those type of academics, and they were up themselves. Like they were very self-aggrandizing.
Yeah, they're in their ivory tower.
Yeah, they were really in an ivory tower, and it seemed like a really poor sort of application, because what they were answering didn't seem to have any resemblance of what we were doing was better. What did Aircraft Sparky say? So female hysteria was a great no, I don't know.
Aircraft Sparky, the treatment for hysteria was great. You know what the treatment for hysteria was?
Yeah, because I watched the film with a group of friends. We were like, what the fuck? It was the film Hysteria, where it was the pre-invention of the vibrator. And it was
and they invented the vibrator because the doctors got tired of doing it manually.
Yeah. So yeah, Aircraft, like I said, the treatment was better. And here's the thing, Sparky, it was like, because back in those times it was a paroxysm that was, okay, we're getting really dirty, but that's what happens to every hangout. So, that's the way life goes. It's it was stimulating, it wasn't an orgasm, Sparky, it was a paroxysm. So because, the only way that females can experience pleasure is by, it's penetration by the married male. Okay. And, whatever you see, like a woman's face is flushed, she's kicking herself around, she's rolling her eyes. That's just an involuntary response. It's got nothing to do with pleasure. That was the theory, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. My wife can't vote. She has to take care of 8 children, do all the housework, and And she hasn't had an orgasm ever. What's wrong with her, doctor? She's hysterical.
That would be good. We should. I wonder if our mutual acquaintance, so Christy, I wonder if she's ever seen that. Imagine what she'd have to say about that film. That would be amazing. If she hasn't seen that film, we've got to get onto her and say, okay, you got to watch this film, and we want to hear your because you'll actually have a lot to say about that.
I haven't actually seen the film, but I've read a lot of the history because this is why I love Foucault, because he just goes through the history of you take the dangerous individual, for example, which that was one of his studies on psychiatry, and he goes, if you look at psychiatry, how would you think that it started? And you might think, oh yeah, maybe they would just take the the simple cases of somebody's sad, so what can we do to make them happier? But no, they went for homicidal mania, I think, and it was people who committed homicide, obviously, but it was there was no rhyme or reason to it, and that's how sort of psychiatry established itself, on this basis of a made-up prognosis, essentially.
Yeah,
they got people acquitted from the crimes that they committed.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean they were still committed to insane asylums, but
Yeah, and that's what I say. I don't want anyone to think that I'm dissing the idea of postmodernism and the need for some. There's certainly some. I'm of the belief. I mean, my knowledge of philosophy is very tentative at best, so it's kind of dangerous for me to make a lot of sweeping statements about I guess philosophy or whatever. But I guess we can say that it's just I think the word postmodernism, it's one of those words that just gets used over and over again. It seems like when somebody sees something that's kind of not quite certain or whatever, or people who argue in a way, oh, it's not quite certain or whatever, they say, oh, you're just into that postmodernism stuff, you need to. And the way they use that, because I think they've developed this idea of what it really is, and I must admit I'm not sure 100% of what it really is, but okay, that means I know what postmodernism is, and then if I'm uncertain of its definition, then I probably have a good idea of what it is.
Well, I mean, depends on the field you're talking about as well. Because,
yeah, it could be the French. I'd say the French philosophy is the way that it's gotten used, because a lot of people sort of seem to that those names, and they do sound intelligent. I mean, when I say the word Foucault, it does sound intelligent if I use it in a certain context. But I think there's some people who are kind of elite, and they do kind of, I think they misuse a lot of that that type of analysis, and they may rely on it way too much, and it kind of short circuits a path of thinking that I think they're going to take, and then it sort of stifles a bit of creativity. But that's when they over rely on something. That's the only criticism.
Well, often it's also just misused in general. Like, a lot of people like to complain about postmodernism ruining the sciences, and it's like, well, Michel Foucault didn't really talk about the sciences. Like, that wasn't his thing. He talked more about society than he did the sciences. You want the guy who ruined the sciences, look up Paul Feyerabend. that's a guy who just like he understood the power of science, and so basically said that it's uh, just as good as any other ideological form of thinking,
Yeah.
and like just as good as homeopathy or um, astrology.
Yeah, and I guess that falls into the grievance study. It was kind of I guess it's the grievance. It's a project that was done. I'm not sure what the point of the project was, but Helen Pluckrose, Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay. So it was some
They
really
want
outrageous things.
they
Yeah,
wanted to
and
demonstrate that the social sciences were bunk.
yeah, I mean, the only thing I got out of it, I mean, yeah, I got a little bit of a giggle out of some of the articles that were there, but it was the other part of my mind is like, okay, that was funny, but then I think, okay, what could happen because there is a propensity for that to happen in a lot of fields, like in physics, I think, because I don't really know physics very well or quantum physics, but from what I understand, like it's a lot of people do write people write some really bogus articles about quantum mechanics, and that's where I see there's a YouTuber or like a physics press for Philip Moriarty. Like I really I've always enjoyed his discourse. Like I listen to his interview because I find him very well informed about that sort of thing, and the amount of time that he has to spend, you know, debunking some there's other quantum mechanics type arguments that have to be debunked because it's just, as he says, it's just, absolute bullocks that. And it would be easy, let's say it's a physics journal, to actually, like, if someone was good at it, if they knew what they were doing, if they knew the language of it, they could write something about quantum mechanics and, whatever, and try to publish it in a physics journal, and it could work. It's like, I don't see, like, if they wanted to make a really definitive statement, like a really good thesis, then, I would have thought, okay, what are you comparing this against?
Hmm. Yeah,
You're doing the
they didn't
social
have a
science.
control.
No, so what's your basis of comparison? Like, are you making, like, do you have a certain number of articles that you can say they're being accepted by these journals? And then, okay, can I do the same thing in a physics thing or
Hmm.
in a maths thing or in a business thing? And then, it would have been more interesting. Maybe you could make a case, but as it
Well,
stands,
but
I'm not really seeing it.
as Christie said as well, like they would get like some of their not rejected, but they would get some of their articles back with notes about what they need to improve upon, and then they would resubmit with those like improvements. Um, that's that's just like a hacking with extra steps. You know what hacking is, don't you?
Yeah,
Hypothesizing after the results are known. So you
yeah,
submitted it, you got it, got it back with edits or suggested edits for resubmission, and then you applied those, but to the next journal. Like,
oh,
isn't
okay.
that hypothesizing after the results are known? You got rejected. Like, it didn't pass muster. Now, sure, it was rejected with edits, not just flat out rejected, but still,
No,
that's
I mean, apart
and that I
from,
think that I think comes down to the fact that the peer review process isn't necessarily there to stop hoaxes, because I'm pretty
no,
certain with most peer review processes that they're going to assume that you are submitting in good faith, like like
yeah,
every other research, or not every other, but most researchers, like
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's shits and giggles. I had a giggle. That's funny, but apart from that, the serious side of me was just like, okay, it's a little bit cynical, and then I'm thinking, okay, these individuals, like, what are they doing to it's one thing to sort of think, okay, I'm going to criticize these things, but then it's like, okay, these are our research areas, like James Lindsay, like you're letting down the math team. I mean, you're a math person, so do some maths.
hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's
Okay, so we've reached the point there of how long has this been going on? I'm trying to stretch. Yeah, 1 hour and
almost an hour
24.
and a
So I
half.
try not
Yeah.
to. Yeah, yeah. So we might sort of wrap the interview phase up. So thank you so much. So I'm thinking so we had the people who joined us in the chat. So thank you very much for joining us in this chat. So memes of destruction and aircraft Sparky. Anyone else? No, I'm sure people will comment later on. Like you might get a few views, but we had like up to 4 people watching. That's actually good for this channel because this is only a
Yeah.
small YouTube channel. Okay, so thank you very much to the Lucky Wanderer, a fellow Australian and fellow honours soon to be survivor of the honors program in academia. So so I hope you all enjoyed this video. So give it a likes up. So subscribe to my channel. So thank you so much to the Lucky Wanderer for joining me for this, because it's been very interesting to talk about a lot of these issues that we've talked about.
I'm not even sure we spent most of the time on my project.
That's okay. Like I got through the
No,
questions that, like because I planned out the questions and you addressed them really, really well. But then there's these subs. You can't help it though. I mean, it happens all the time.
Oh,
You
look,
can't help it.
the best discussions end up on tangents.
Yeah. Okay. So those of you who are watching, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in my next video.
Thank you for having me.